Are animal proteins equal to plant proteins in terms of cardiovascular disease risk? Or do they differ? In this video, we will investigate that exact question. How exactly does animal proteins differ from plant proteins in affecting your cardiovascular health? When we look at things such as oxidative stress, looking at what a fat molecule is and how it interacts inside of your digestive system and the human host. We will look at the top non-communicable diseases such as atherosclerosis or hardening of the arteries, as well as developing plaques within your blood vessels and arteries, and how these proteins are different from one another. This is a diagram illustrated from nutritionfacts.org headed by Dr. Greger. The last stage here, as you see, is a buildup of fatty tissues, also known as atherosclerosis, known to give you diseases and maybe potentially end your life, such as heart disease, stroke, and heart attack. If the protein we ate, like this juicy steak or these barbecued meats, turned into these tofu planks or these soybeans, we look at how plant proteins and animal proteins differ in terms of cardiovascular disease risk. Scientists from the Department of Nutritional Sciences and Pennington Biomedical Research Center in the U.S. took a look at how plant proteins and animal proteins differ in these disease risks, specifically looking at the risk for CVD, which is our top health problems in the developing world. This literature review looks at the intervention and observational studies of proteins from plant or animal origins. What they found was that animal proteins and protein sources affected your cardiovascular disease risk as we increase the consumption of protein-rich foods. Typically results in a lower intake of nutritious foods because there's only so much room you can have on your plate. And this influences the outcome of your health simultaneously. So it's not just about what you put on your plate, but it's really what you're missing. So you may be having too many animal proteins and in fact not enough other plant proteins and plant sources. Mechanisms at work of these protein sources is very complex. It includes amino acids, non-protein components such as lipids, chemicals, bacteria, and other structures who work concomitantly in the whole food as a matrix. The interaction with the protein and the existing gut microbiome is also a big factor in the human host. And the evidence so far suggests that cardiovascular disease risk can be reduced through a dietary intervention that includes more plant proteins versus what we see here, global demand for the typical American diet, which is rich in animal proteins. Researchers took a look at observational studies for cardiovascular risk as well as for blood health. And they found that there is a difference between animal protein and plant protein intake with an association for the blood pressure. Now, blood pressure and blood pressure medication is a huge industry and influence in the pharmaceutical industry, which create billions of revenue every year. Now, if we were to just control this through vegetable protein intake, would help your cystic and your diastolic blood pressure at the same time. Here is a visual representation table of multiple studies reviewed, starting with a women cohort for dozens of years, finding an inverse association between plant protein intake and heart disease risk, reduce in cardiovascular disease mortality, and substitution with these plant proteins will help your heart. And your mortality rate was associated positively when you intaked red meat, so be particularly aware of that. Valentine's Day steak dinner or something in association with heart disease rather than a full heart. Now, as we see this, we are what we are made of, and our proteins just generally in our body are the recycled proteins of what our diet is. As you see here, diets followed by the main population. We look at DASH, heart, and bowl diets, all touted as being heart healthy diets. See here, the DASH diet has a heart healthy benefit, which incorporates plant proteins. Shout out to Ornish diet here, which is known to help patients with heart disease and reduce their symptoms of these chronic conditions through an intervention of a plant-based diet. Now, we can replicate them at the patient's homes, which is vital for getting these patients the tools that they need. Now, when we look at this burrito, I want you to think of food as a whole food package, not just these isolated components. It's easy for us to think of this protein on these ribs or this sausage as just protein. However, your meal also includes a unique profile of amino acids, fatty acid, micronutrients, carbohydrates, and other bioactive components that either benefit or have an adverse effect. Adverse effects such as cardiovascular disease risk, and as you saw, an atherosclerosis risk. Amino acids are specific in their physiological effects on the human host. Leucine, isoleucine, and valine, as you see here, have a beneficial role in muscle protein synthesis and induce quickened exercise muscle recovery. So it is possible that different concentrations of amino acids equal to different muscle development and strategies for physical fitness in a human host. Not only the type of amino acid, but how it functions and interacts with our body, such as our gut microbiome, is essential in mediating the role of cardiovascular disease risk. There is scientific proof there is a relationship between cardiovascular disease risk, your diet, and your microbiome in your gut, i.e. what are you eating on a consistent basis and how is that interacting with a cocktail of good and bad bacteria that are in your gut. As we see here, what happens is when you eat animal proteins, some of these proteins get transferred and oxidized into TMAO, trimethylamino oxidase. Elevated plasma TMAO was consistently shown to be a strong predictor of this major cardiovascular disease risks. As we see here, it is beneficial to incorporate more plant proteins in your diet and therefore reduce your animal. Where can we get plant proteins and what are the micronutrients, lipid contents, and amino acid contents? Potentially some plant bioactive and other components? Here's a list showing things from legumes, beans, whole grain cereals, other vegetables, and nuts. And on the next table we show sources of animal proteins such as red meat, seafood, eggs, poultry, looking at their lipid and amino acid content, dairy, and processed meats. As we see, there is more of an additive preservatives. There's more of your heterocyclic amines, which are present in your processed meats due to heating, higher fat content, and the protein content is particularly different as well. In conclusion, to reduce your cardiovascular disease risk, include more plant sources of protein in your diet and definitely reduce or cut out all of your animal protein sources. Now, if you would like a deep explanation of what TMAO is and how it interacts in your body, check out my other video about TMAO in depth. Hope you guys have a great day, and here's a little clip about why you should eat your vegetables.
Work out, plenty of rest, eat your green vegetables.
That's what my mom is always saying. I just never actually believed her.
Come on, go! Keep it steady!
It's a web. Go, Spidey, go!
You got trouble!
Again, guys, thanks for watching so much. Subscribe, like, and comment below. Check out my website at theveganfoodscientist.com.